My father didn't even hesitate when he said it. The air still smelled of overcooked pasta and the cheap lavender candle my stepmother used to mask tension instead of resolving it. The weak ceiling bulb buzzed above us, flickering just enough to make the room feel colder than it was. And he looked at me the way people look at strangers who have overstayed their welcome. "Get out," he said. "We're done with a useless child." His voice didn't crack. Mine nearly did. My stepmother stood beside him, arms folded across her silk blouse, a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. She worked as a real estate agent, one of those who spoke softly to clients but sharpened her words at home. Her perfume lingered in the doorway, sickly sweet, mixing with the faint smell of something burning in the oven. My cousin Lily, who lived with us because family helps family, leaned against the counter, twirling a strand of her hair. She enjoyed watching things unravel. He always had. If this resonates with you, share your thoughts. It means more than you know. My name is Aubrey. I'm 30 years old now, but back then, on the night of my 16th graduation, I learned what it meant to be disposable. My diploma was still in my hand when my father told me to leave. The gold seal smudged beneath my thumb, the ink still smelling faintly metallic. I had spent years trying to earn a place in this house, patching holes in walls, folding laundry not mine, helping my stepmother polish her listings while she told people how happy families lived. I did chores quietly, thinking quietness was the price of love. I never understood that some people only love what they can control. A memory drifted through me, soft as dust in sunlight. My father tying my shoelaces when I was 5. His hands were steady, his voice warm. "You're my girl, Aubrey," he whispered. "I'll always be here." The porch light had been glowing behind him, weak but comforting. I held on to that version of him far longer than I should have. The version standing before me now was someone else entirely. He pointed toward the door. "Pack what you need and leave. Tonight." Lily snorted. "Take the trash out on your way," she added, nudging a plastic bag with her foot as if the symbolism might amuse her. My stepmother didn't speak, but her silence was permission. That was her talent. She destroyed by doing nothing at exactly the right time. I looked around the kitchen. The chipped tile. The dripping faucet I fixed last winter. The table I sanded and stained myself because my father said paying someone was a waste. Everything in this house had a piece of me in it. And yet all my father saw was something expendable. I felt the floor tilt, but I kept my voice steady. "Where am I supposed to go?" My father shrugged. "Anywhere, not here." It wasn't anger in his tone. It was indifference. Somehow that hurt more. I walked toward my room, each step echoing lightly on the floorboards. The hallway smelled faintly of old carpet and the cheap cologne my father used to wear before he started claiming I reminded him of every failure he ever made. A strange thing to tell your daughter. My room was small, barely big enough for a bed, desk, and the box of books I collected from yard sales. I packed a backpack with clothes, my notebook, and the small silver necklace my biological mother left me before she passed. I remembered her briefly, the warmth of her voice, the way she brushed my hair on Sunday mornings. A memory that always felt like sunlight inside my chest. When I stepped back into the hallway, my father didn't even look up. My stepmother held her phone up, pretending to scroll. Lily smirked again. I walked out into the evening. Cold air met my skin the way truth meets denial, shocking but clarifying. The streetlights hummed overhead as I pulled my jacket tighter. The neighborhood smelled of grilling meat, charcoal smoke drifting from a house party 2 doors down. Laughter carried across the lawn, muffled and careless. It felt like another universe. I found myself near the alley behind the convenience store, the one where the broken street lamp flickered like it was remembering how to stay lit. Hunger gnawed at me. My stomach twisted. I hadn't eaten since noon. I dug through a trash bin, not for food exactly, just for something to hold myself together. Can to recycle. Plastic bottle. Something to make me feel like I still had purpose. A soft voice cut through the quiet. "Are you Aubrey Hale?" I straightened slowly. A man in a charcoal gray suit stood a few feet away. He looked wildly out of place against the graffiti-stained wall and the smell of old cardboard. His shoes were too polished for alleys. His tie too straight. He held a leather briefcase in one hand, its edges worn but well cared for. Yes, I whispered. He smiled. Not the dismissive, superior smile I had grown used to, but something warmer. Something that held shape without cruelty. "My name is Daniel Pierce. I've been looking for you." My pulse thudded in my ears. Why? He opened the briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope, thick and heavy. A relative left instructions regarding their estate. He handed it to me gently as though it were fragile. Everything now belongs to you. My breath hitched. Why me? There's one condition, he said softly. And we'll discuss it when you're ready. But tonight, you need somewhere safe. The word safe wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't know how to accept. I glanced down at the envelope. My name was written in looping handwriting, carefully inked, as though the writer expected someone to keep it forever. The alley suddenly felt warmer. The world slightly less cruel. Like something had shifted, quiet but certain. Daniel waited, hands folded politely. May I take you somewhere to rest? You shouldn't be alone tonight. I looked back toward the street I had come from, the house where I had lived, the family who had chosen to let me go. A wave of grief pressed against my ribs. But underneath it, something else stirred. A sense of beginning. I nodded. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden someone was trying to throw away. Daniel didn't rush me. He let me stand there beneath that half-dead street lamp, holding the envelope as if it were something alive. The night smelled faintly of rain on warm pavement, and from somewhere far off, I could hear the steady thrum of cars rolling along the highway. Life kept moving even when mine had cracked open hours earlier. We walked toward his car, an older sedan, clean but modest. He opened the passenger door gently, as though he understood how fragile a 16-year-old could feel after being thrown away by the only home she'd ever known. The seats smelled faintly of leather polish and eucalyptus. Safe scents. Soft. Nothing like the sour cleaning spray my stepmother used every time she wanted to erase my presence. He drove without speaking, giving silence the dignity it needed. Streetlights passed over us in slow pulses, each one pulling a memory out of me whether I wanted it or not. My father sitting at the kitchen table, tapping his knuckles against a half-empty beer bottle. You never do enough, he muttered once, staring not at me but through me like I was made of smoke. Another memory, him teaching me to ride a bike, cheering when I finally steadied myself. Look at you go, Aubrey, he shouted, his laughter ringing against the houses. Those two versions of him lived inside me, constantly rearranging my understanding of love. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice was low. I'm taking you to a safe house owned by the executor of the estate. You won't owe anything. You'll just rest. Rest. I hadn't realized how foreign that word had become. The house we arrived at was small, tucked between two tall pines. Warm yellow light glowed from the windows. The porch smelled of old wood and something citrus. Lemongrass, maybe. A wind chime tinkled softly somewhere near the eaves, each note thin and delicate, like it might shatter under too much weight. Inside sat an older woman with silver hair braided neatly over her shoulder. She wore a faded blue sweater and held a mug of tea that steamed gently into the lamplight. You must be Aubrey, she said, her voice soft as flannel. I'm Miriam. You're safe here. Her kindness was so unexpected it made my throat ache. Daniel stayed only long enough to ensure I had water, a place to sleep, and the envelope safely on the table. I'll return in the morning, he said. Read it when you're ready. When the door closed behind him, the house settled into a peaceful quiet. Miriam guided me to a spare bedroom that smelled faintly of lavender and clean linens. The sheets were cool. The air calm. I sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope heavy in my hands. My name, Aubrey Hale, curled across the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. My fingers trembled as I slid it open. Inside was a letter written on thick cream-colored paper. The ink had a slightly floral scent, something old but well-preserved. My dear Aubrey, if you are reading this, it means life has delivered you to a crossroads far earlier than you deserved. I swallowed hard. You do not know me well, but I knew your mother. And she loved you with a fierceness that lives in every breath you take. I promised her that if the world ever turned cruel, I would protect what she cherished most, her child. My breath caught. This estate, my land, my savings, my home, is yours. But only if you meet one condition. You must pursue the life you want, not the one others try to shrink you into. My fingers tightened around the page. Find your strength, Aubrey. Grow. Become someone who can stand without apology. When you can look in the mirror and say you are no longer afraid, then the estate becomes legally yours. There was no signature. Just a small pressed flower taped to the bottom. A violet, delicate but persistent. I stared at the letter until the words blurred. My chest felt tight with something unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. Or the first hint of freedom. Miriam knocked softly. Would you like some tea? Her voice anchored me. I nodded, wiping my face. We sat in the small kitchen, the kettle hissing gently on the stove. The room smelled of chamomile and old wood. A single bulb hung above us, glowing softly like a lantern in a memory. She didn't ask for details. She didn't pry. She simply said, people break in places no one sees. But they grow there too. I carried her words with me into sleep. Daniel returned the next morning, footsteps quiet on the porch. I met him at the table, the letter open between us. So, he said gently. Do you understand the terms? I think so. My voice was steadier than I felt. I have to build a life that's actually mine. He nodded. Exactly. Over the next few weeks he helped me file paperwork, enroll in temporary schooling and secure therapy sessions through a community program. Miriam taught me how to cook simple meals, how to mend a torn pocket, how to breathe through the moments when memories hit too sharply. And slowly I began to shift. I took a part-time job at a bookstore, the kind with dusty shelves, warm lighting and the comforting smell of old pages. The owner, a quiet man named Reed, let me reorganize the young adult section. You have an eye for stories, he said once, handing me a box of new arrivals. I started writing in my notebook again. Poems. Letters I never sent. Thoughts that unfurled into something gentler than survival. A year passed. Then another. By 18 I was standing taller. My voice steadier. My choices finally mine. One afternoon, Daniel returned with a folder stamped with a gold seal. He set it on the table gently. You fulfilled the condition, Aubrey, he said. You built a life with intention, not fear. The estate is now legally yours. The world went still for a breath. Then another. A memory floated through me, my mother brushing my hair, humming softly, sunlight catching in the strands. You're stronger than you think, she whispered in that memory. I hadn't believed her then. I believed her now. The estate wasn't just land or money. It was proof that someone had seen me as worthy long before I learned to see myself. I visited my father only once years later. He opened the door, older, smaller, the house darker than I remembered. He looked at me with something like regret. But regret needs courage to matter, and he didn't have enough. I hope you're well, I said simply. He nodded. You too. And that was all. I left with no bitterness. Just closure. Life rearranged itself quietly after that. New home, new studies, new beginnings that didn't ask me to shrink. If you've lived anything like this, tell your story, and don't forget to subscribe. Some people lose everything and begin again. Some are pushed out and find the path they were meant for. And some inherit not wealth but the chance to reclaim themselves. Sometimes courage arrives in silence.